Hey guys, I'm going to go through today explaining what happens when you have simple sugars, as well as when you have stuff such as dextrose, maltodextrin, stuff that pretty much reacts in the same way in the body as sugars do. So when you're consuming sugars, or let's start with what should happen to the body. So your body has something called glucagon, should be fairly controlled, and then your insulin levels. So naturally, once you have carbohydrates, the simplest form of carbohydrates, once the body's done with what it's got to do with it, it turns into glucose. The body releases something called glucagon, which is glucose, which counteracts how your insulin works. So what should happen is it should be pretty much in line with your glucagon and your insulin levels throughout the day. Unfortunately, what happens is most people, we wake up in the morning, we're pretty steady. You will have your cereal, which most people will be pretty surprised, even stuff like fruit and fibre is pumped full of sugar. So the third ingredient on your fruit and fibre is probably sugar. So what happens is your glucose levels increase massively. Your insulin levels then have to counteract that. So they then come up. Unfortunately, being they're simple sugars, what will happen is what goes up must come down. So your glucose levels drop, because obviously your body's released insulin to counteract the glucose being too high. Now you're at a massive drop. This is when you're feeling a bit rubbish. Your insulin levels then have to follow suit. Let's be honest, most of us, what we're going to do is because we're a bit tired, I could probably do with a cup of tea with a bit of sugar in, or I could do with a couple of biscuits, or I could do with something else that's probably got sugars in, or maltodextrin, or sweeteners, and whatever. So what then happens is your glucose then increases, insulin again increases, and it looks something like that. Unfortunately, what then happens, if you regularly do this too often, your body goes, forget this. We know that the glucose is going to be high, so we're going to start our insulin high. Because you haven't pumped that glucose in yet, you're then crashing, and you're then doing something similar to this, which is when you start getting stuff like diabetes. You're increasing your rates of, when you get diabetes, you increase your rates of having strokes, heart attacks, everything else. So by eating a controlled, balanced diet, that's not to say don't eat any sugars, sometimes they're actually quite beneficial. I will make another video on that. We want it to look a lot more like this rather than like this. Alright, if you've got any questions, drop me a message or leave me a comment below. Fire it over and I'll be happy.